Sega's final console had a lot of great games, and some that were, well, kinda crap. But one thing's for sure, that you probably missed out on many of them if you haven't been playing it in the last 20 years. I am the Game Collector, and this is Second Opinion Games, and today I show you games that you may have missed on the Sega Dreamcast. Probably.
Second Opinion Games.
First up, a game called Evil Twin. This is one that I was really looking forward to, and I would always see it advertised in magazines. Sadly, we never got it here in America. It was a PAL-only exclusive, and I was always really jealous. I even went out and bought a PAL Dreamcast just to play the game, and when I first started playing it, well, it didn't quite win me over, but in the end, it really did. The art design reminds me of a Tim Burton movie. The voice acting is actually top-notch, but what really sells it for me is the writing of the voice acting, because the storyline is incredible. At first, I thought they were just saying jibber-jabber words, but as the story progressed, I really came to appreciate it for what it is. Just like the overall controls, they felt a little wonky, but once I started easing myself back into the weird shape of the Dreamcast controller, I really started to appreciate how they managed to pull this all together. If you're a PS2 owner, you might have picked it up on that console if you also lived in Europe only. So basically, you kind of have to mod your Dreamcast in order to play it, or go out of your way to pick up a European console. Either way, it's a real pain in the butt to get this to run. But worth every penny. No, it's a lot easier to import Japanese games like Rainbow Cotton. Sure, you might need a boot disk to hot swap out while your system's running, but eventually you'll figure it out and get it to work. Here we have Rainbow Cotton, a game with tons of skinnily clad little fairies attached to a witch for some reason, and little cartoons in between every boss battle and each of the levels of the game. Sure, most of the time the camera is so far behind your character you can't see bullets that are heading straight at you, and that does start to be a problem here and there, but overall the game itself is quite enjoyable, even if it is very much like old Star Fox, only with much more cleaned up graphics and maybe not as well executed. The Dreamcast also got a lot of games that never saw the light of day, at least until people started dumping them online. This is Propeller Arena. It's sort of like Crazy Taxi. The whole thing is DJ'd. The music sounds like it's done by The Offspring, but it's probably some type of weird cover band because they didn't want to pony out the money for the actual Offspring. Unlike Crazy Taxi, I'm sure this would have been a hit in the arcades if they also would have released it there, but they shelved it. Why did they shelve it? Well, most people say it's because 9/11 happened, and there's this one stage where you're flying around skyscrapers, and it probably wasn't the best time to release the game. Others say no, it's because Sega was hemorrhaging money, but keep in mind, Sega stayed around as a company and started putting games like Super Monkey Ball out on the GameCube and PS2 and all of that, so they easily could have ported over onto Xbox Live at some point, but they never seemed to do it, which is a shame because this is actually one of the best airplane games I've ever played, and one of the most fun multiplayer games. The ton of kooky characters are also here. One of them's even called Shameless Cat, which another word for cat might be something a little bit dirty, so basically you have a untamed pussycat, of course. So this is definitely one of the very best Dreamcast games, even if it never actually got a full release. Geist Force also didn't get an official release because the game was nowhere near finished. It may have been just a little bit too ambitious for what the Dreamcast can do, because there are a lot of effects, because you can just blow apart all parts of the environment. There's huge boss battles, and this was definitely gonna be a Star Fox killer, as if they didn't already have a franchise for that, like the Panzer Dragoon series. No, they had to create something completely else, and they would have had a definite winner with this one, especially in the arcades yet again, because arcade games are what Sega does best. But trying to bring it home to their tiny little console that was a little bit too far underpowered at the time was probably not the way to do it. Eventually, they scrapped the entire project because it just wasn't salvageable. Just like Castlevania Resurrection, this was a little known gem that almost no one even believed there was even a working prototype of, and well, there's kind of little tiny bits and pieces of barely working gameplay. There's a lot of slowdown, hit detection is absolutely terrible, character models are about as crude as you could possibly get, lots of clipping, falling through walls, but the graphics are quite impressive for the time, and I would have loved to play this game even if it would have turned out to be a remarkably average game. Your whip has a charge attack. Now don't think that there's anything more than what I am showing you. There's maybe 10 minutes of playableness in the entire thing, and even saying it's playable is kind of a push. Most of the time you're going to be clipped into a wall or just wandering around looking at little tiny artifacts, trying to really imagine what this game could have been. But could have definitely turned into didn't, as this game was completely scrapped early on in its development. Flintstones Viva Rock Vegas also didn't get a physical release. No, it was scrapped when it was about 3/4 of the way through development because the Dreamcast just wasn't going to stick around very long, and they kind of knew it. They didn't want to release a game for a console that was going to be dead in just a few months, and I am completely okay with the fact that this one stayed on the cutting room floor. Now, you might notice that there's no engine sound effects, and that's because, keep in mind, the cars in this universe are actually powered by your feet, and the tracks are just nonsensical. If you have to have a giant arrow at the top of your track design in order to tell you where to go to complete the lap, well, that's just really bad design. And you could still play this game today on the PlayStation 2, but they ditched the cel-shaded graphics and they made the whole game slightly more playable. But more likely, I don't think it's playable on any console or any version, and no one should probably buy or even try to play this ever again. Okay, let's look at some fan-made games, because the homebrew community is very active. How about Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter, something that I would have loved to see and would still love to see in a video game. And when I started playing this, well, the whole thing's just broken. Trying to perform the simplest move is just not gonna happen. I don't even know if the Mortal Kombat characters have any special moves because I couldn't get them to work. And the graphics are kind of what I was expected. But you know what? Fighting games are meant to professionals to put together. Trying to put together something like this with one guy was never gonna work, because if a fighting game's not balanced or even be able to control the characters on a regular easy basis, well, then it's definitely doomed to fail. I would like to see maybe a team of people take another crack at this one, but for now, it's a hard pass. Homebrewers also like to make Streets of Rage games, which is basically under the title Beats of Rage, and sometimes they're really good, but I decided to show you some that aren't, like this Road Rash motorcycle Beats of Rage game, which is just hilarious. You're on a straight path and you just beat up everyone on motorcycles. It's not fun at all, even for a little bit, but it's kind of amazing that it even exists. Also, we have a full remake of Golden Axe, and even though you can play as Death Adder this time around, it does not save the game at all. I'd rather be playing it on the Sega Genesis, because at least then they have the Conan the Barbarian screams. Here it seems to be entirely cut out, and with it, all of its personality. But homebrewers also do a lot of things right, like take the translations from a Japanese game that was only released on a PAL territory, and then release the game in English for us Americans to play, like Naples Tales, which is a 3D action-adventure game with a heck of a lot of words, and a whole lot of complicated processes to play the game that really don't need to be here. You had a really good 3D game if you would have just kept it to short levels that I could just jump into easily and play. I would totally love this game. Instead, it's super wordy, there's a huge storyline, and I don't know what the heck to do at any point in time. Maybe if I sat down and gave this one more of a chance, I would completely love it, because I do like the actual gameplay when I could get to it and jump past all of the wordy words. But as for now, this just isn't my jive. I want something a little bit more fast-paced and arcade. Some modders out there figured out that if they took out the laser and put in an SD card slot in their Dreamcast, they could actually get the arcade version of Atomic Wave games to play on their Dreamcast. If you never heard of this, they made like 27 games in the arcade, and I'm gonna show you 2 of them. One of them is Maximum Speed, a racing game that feels a lot like Daytona USA, to the point where it actually plays better on the Dreamcast than the actual Daytona USA game did for the Dreamcast. And I have the driving controller to play this game, and I gotta say, it actually feels better than in the arcade itself. The Dreamcast had a terrific arcade racing controller, so I cannot recommend it enough, especially when playing this very game. It feels arcade perfect, and that's because it really kind of is. The music is hard rockin', and this is an adrenaline rush from start to finish, which is exactly what I would expect from an arcade port. But one of the things I didn't expect is that the Dreamcast would have one of the best run and guns of all times with Dolphin Blue. It's just a run and gun arcade style, but it's not arcade difficult. Matter of fact, you can play through the entire game without dying if you got good enough. The graphics here are just beautiful. Mixing up 3D things with 2D things in a run and gun, sometimes it does get a little difficult to see the enemy fire on the screen, and if you take out your controller and plug it in the port too, you can then play as the female character if you really wanted to. And this is definitely the best arcade run and gun I have ever played in my entire life, and that's not an understatement. I would have actually put it on my top 10 run guns if I could actually get the game to work at the time, but every time I tried to emulate it, my computer kept on freezing up. No, it has to use the power of the Dreamcast in order to get it running flawlessly, and even then sometimes it struggles a bit. But I will never turn down a chance to play this game 2-player with a friend, or even anyone off the street if they want me to. You do have a continuous fire if you happen to have a controller with turbo buttons, but you can always pick up lots of hard-hitting weapons. It's very similar to Metal Slug, maybe even a little bit too similar, but with enough of its own personality that makes it stand out, with underwater levels and levels where you're riding a dolphin, and you even have a special move button that recharges over time, instead of just limiting it to a pickup that you occasionally get. And this is definitely the best Dreamcast game that you missed out on. Probably. But of course, that's just my opinion. Thanks for watching.
Oh, there wasn't any problem. Just a slight difference of opinion, which besides was settled by both parties in an adult and concentrated manner.
The master nevertheless took away the Zip-It, and as a result, your hopes for reunification have taken a blow.
It was the right decision, and who are you anyway, young man?
Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I had a great time making it because I love the Sega Dreamcast. So soon I want to make my own top 10 Dreamcast games, which will be very different from everyone else's, which is great because I want you guys to comment in the box down below on what your favorite Dreamcast games are, so then I could do your favorite Dreamcast games on another video. I guarantee you that I have all of the Dreamcast games because it was truly one of my favorite consoles of all times, if not my very favorite. Because the Dreamcast is such a special machine, it will always have a place in my game room, and I even have it under a policy in my house to have at least one Dreamcast plugged in at all times, which means I have like 8 of them. So I really love the console. Until later, I will see you again, guys.